All right, everybody. We are now live here for a discussion on Book 8 of the Wars of Light and Shadow. That is Storm Fortress, and
Woohoo.
it's also the fifth book in the Alliance of Light story arc. The end of the third full story arc in this 11-book series, The Wars of Light and Shadow. And I am so pleased to have with me here today Janny Wurts, the author of The Wars of Light and Shadow. And we also have my usual friends here, Chris from the Chronicle of Chris. We got the great Vasha from Reading by the Rainy Mountain. We got the great Chibi Po, who is the multiple time reader of this great series. And we also have special guest P.L. Stewart, author of the Drowned Kingdom saga, and also a someone who has read the full series already.
Mhm.
And so we're looking forward to this conversation here that I've been dying to get to. And so um, we're going to be talking full spoilers here for Storm Fortress and the series, before that. So if you haven't read this far, please take note of that. And the and also we probably be talking spoilers for some of the short stories that have also been put out in tandem with this. But for the most part, it'll be this book that we just finished and had discussions on previously. So um, I have a list of a few questions here, thematic questions. But if anybody else has questions that come up, please jump in and let me know. Um, so I'm going to start with Chris because he's jumping out of his seat over there, and just give
The
me
R2D2 dance, you know?
so Chris, overall impression for the finale of this arc of this book and what we've read up so far.
Well, my one line review that I put up on Storygraph was as fine a book as I have ever read. Honestly, like I'm not just saying this because Johnny's here. My feelings when I closed the book, sat in silence for about an hour, were that oh my god, like the journey that not just this book has been on because it's very much self-contained about the Siege of Ilstern and that kind of stuff, but the general flow and everything that's been happening is to that point. It just felt like not only did events happen, but our understanding of everything that was going on and happening in the world was elevated multiple times throughout what's going on in much the same way as the characters. And I think that's the bit that really makes it for me is that the characters were discovering things about what was going on in the world and how it worked in much the same ways. And for a lot of them, it seemed like they knew, but they'd chosen to forget some of that, if that makes sense. And that joy of discovery is just enormous fun to read. Like I have to say, just the joy of discovery of events and things and the way things work and how well it's all put together was just it was just so satisfying. Like the R2D2 dance is maybe part ADHD, whatever, but it is general excitement even weeks after I finished this book.
All right, and Vasha, overall thoughts on what we've been through here so far.
Oh yeah, like so many cool things happen in this book. I always love when we get more expansion of the world of Athira and the magic and everything, which we got in every book. But this one had us meeting a dragon and really cool, not destruction, I guess, a utilization of grim wards. And yeah, it felt like everything that we've read so far amped up, and all of it was like brilliantly tied up because we've been building up to it. People talk about how endings are earned. I feel like we deserved this ending of the book. And yeah, and you guys know how I read last minute for every discussion, but I have just finished chapter one of Finish Its Trial, so that's the impact this book had on me. So,
Wow, Vasha jumping
Cheated.
ahead. That's
I
new.
know.
And the last page, I assume, as well.
Eh, Yeah.
All right. So, PL.
Don't do that with Destiny's Conflict. You'll be shattered.
Oh, that's a
I usually just play along for the joke. I don't ever read the last page.
awesome. So PL, when did you read? When did you finish reading this book, particularly?
I read this book in the end of 2023. So yeah, I have to say. So right now I'm coming to you from beautiful Barrie, which is now north of Toronto, Canada. We're under siege from the snow. Okay, but on the topic of sieges, I'm currently reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I have 2 books left. And Malazan is often held up as, peerless in terms of warfare. And in particular, if you've read Malazan, the first book, there's a siege, and that is an iconic siege scenes. But I hold this up as the absolute number one best military siege of fantasy I've ever read. This is it right here. It is devastating. It is, gorily beautiful. It is poignant. It is like, this is the best siege book in fantasy I've ever read. There's so many things that are great about this book, and of course the entire arc. But I think the one thing that stands out to me is that, we all know Arathon's pledge, and that he won't fight. So I think from the beginning, my biggest question was, will he or won't he? Will he be forced to break his vow for necessity to save lives? Because we know when it comes down to it, he'll sacrifice himself to save others. But will he fight to save others? And that was the burning question I had going into this book. And of course, that was answered. And of course, knowing Arathon, he always does things in these unique ways that you can never predict, right? And but yeah, it was an absolutely glorious book. What an ending to the arc. And there's so many things I want to say, but I'll leave it there and give people a chance to chat. But this was a absolutely fabulous book. And I quickly say, if I was going to rank it amongst all the glorious books of Wars of the Light and Shadow, it's definitely top 3. I toggle back and forth. Peril's Gate, obviously, the final book for me is number 1. I can't wait till you folks get there. Other than Chibipo, who's been there already. Like, it is, just get ready. But that's indisputably number 1. I toggle back and forth between Peril's Gate and Storm Fortress as my number 2. Maybe on my next reread I'll have a more definitive answer. But yeah,
awesome. And Chibipo, when did you finish the first time Storm Fortress?
If I remember correctly, it's almost 20 years now. It was 2007, wasn't it?
It came out in 2007, yeah.
Yeah. I was, fully in my, absolutely devoted. So I was like, as soon as it came out, I had a copy. And so that was, 2007. Much like PL, just absolutely floored, like, from start to finish. It's like every time, I get a Janny book, it's like, start reading it and I don't stop. She can even testify because she gave me the, let me see the preview of Song of the Mysteries, and like 2 days later I was like, I'm done. And she's like, really? I'm like, yes. Wow. It's so good.
Outstanding. and all right, so it's pretty much the same thing for me. This book really put so much stuff together for me that I seemed like I was waiting for it, didn't know I was waiting for it, and it happened, and I was just blown away by so much stuff that happened in here, and I'm blown away by your dragon. The dragon was just awesome. So But PL mentioned sieges earlier, and specifically with this book is a big siege through much of the book itself. And I was meaning to ask you, Janny, specifically about sieges, and what did you hope to accomplish with this siege as far as doing something differently than what came before? Of course, we get the famous siege like of Helm's Deep out of Lord of the Rings, and some other ones that have been mentioned throughout fantasy history. But what did you hope to do differently that others have done in the
Helm's
past?
Deep was really a short-term siege.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
In my research, I threw roots into a lot of long-term sieges where people literally starved to death, where the biggest peril came from within, where the people started to defect, and where panic became the problem, and where if there wasn't a solidarity going in, if any people left, you were actually weakening the morale. So I looked at the Siege of Rhodes. I read a lot of histories and accounts of real life sieges. So I wanted to get that element of what it is like to go for a long-term siege where you can't get out, where food supplies are going to run low, where you can't send your women and children to safety because that says you're going to lose up front. And so the extraordinary amount of courage that even the common citizens have to show. And so that was pretty much my inspiration to make this siege more realistic for a long-term one, because the fantasy ones, again, they glorify war. And people do desperate things when they're under that much pressure.
Right.
So I wanted to turn the tables on that a bit. It's like the old General Patton question, perfect person to prosecute a war, but you don't want him at the peace table. And so I wanted to definitely graphically show that not all heroes are heroes in the same circumstances, that a circumstance can pressure a normally heroic person to actually flip and do disreputable things. I don't believe any one leader has all the qualities for all situations. And what might make them a hero in one situation might make them the villain in another. So at what point does that snapping point happen? And are they justified? Do they feel they're justified? And so that's where you get the spread of points of view. So I hope that answers you. It wasn't supposed to be cool.
Yeah, right. Well, that's interesting because we had parrying, snapping, basically, and we had that conflict going on between whether or not to get the women and children out, and the Duke Brancian saying no, and Arathon, begging them to make it so. We had his brother eventually turning against him in Mayern, and getting his family out and going on the journey with them. So there was a lot of different viewpoints from the characters themselves, that led that really give you the whole gamut of
what makes a character snap.
Yeah, right.
Mayern snapped because morally he could not take the coercion that was going on. He couldn't take what the tactics that Brancian was using, and Brancian would do anything. Parian snapped because he figured if he killed Arathon, that would end the curse. That would end the siege. So what makes them snap, and which way are they going to fly? Because I think people often don't know. I mean, Paul is a first responder. He knows. You see people in crisis situations, and often the person who steps forward is not the one you expect. The one that mouths off, the one that acts the hero, the one you think is going to be the one that's going to take charge, often is the one that doesn't. It's some little mouse on the sideline that runs in there and deals. So I saw that in Outward Bound. I see that often in life, that it's not the person that you expect who's going to hold the line.
That's right.
I think actually adding on from that, we even see Arathon have his moments where he is not his best version of himself here as well, because he has the thing of what's best in his compassionate sense, or otherwise he kind of decides, oh, I'm going to flee, and circumstances stop him from doing it. you know.
Yeah. I just thought it was very well done. I really enjoyed that aspect of this siege being having so many different facets to it and lasting throughout pretty much the whole book because that just makes more sense for a siege, like you said, war not being glorified. It's not a fun time. It's not something that people are going to go rah rah about. They're generally worried. They're concerned about their livelihood. They're concerned about their homes being destroyed. And I just thought that was very well played out in here.
Yeah, I think sieges and Janny, what an amazing depiction, and she spoke about it. She touched on this. Bring out desperation on both sides. The side that wants to take the fortress is desperate to have a victory. The side, obviously, that is trying to defend their fortress is desperate to save the fortress, save their lives, preserve their pride and honor, especially with the Duke. A lot of this is because this is a supposedly untakeable fortress. And, if you're the person who is in charge when it finally falls, what a shame, what a blow to one's honor. And because Brandy's so indomitable, he's this indomitable, unyielding figure. And the one thing I loved, the way Janny depicted the entire family survives. They are the epitome of being martial. They sleep with their weapons. These folks are warlike, and for them to lose, for them it's almost unthinkable, right? So they're for them to surrender or to come to some kind of negotiation or that's for most of them it's off the table, right? It's not even a consideration because they have to win, and they're going to win or they're going to die. That's essentially how things start from, I think, their point of view. But of course that changes. But I love the fact that the siege brought out the desperation of both sides because Lyser needs a win too. He's desperate as well. He wants to get Arathon and he needs a win. And you see that he is being. This is the first book where I really saw the depths of his manipulation, how deceptive he was. And of course, I love him. He's actually my favorite character because he's so unlikable. So, but his scorn of magic, except for his own, of course, right? Because he's highly hypocritical. He rejects his alliance with Seldy and the Coriani, but he's also this charismatic, dogged, exemplary war leader in a lot of ways. He cares about the loss of his army as he tries to take this fortress. He's willing to risk himself, lead from the front, motivate. Because in a conflict like this, it's probably going to be the leadership that turns the tide of the battle. So actually, if we look objectively, he actually led fairly well in terms of but of course it didn't work out the way he wanted. But yeah, the desperation was a big theme I saw in this book that I really enjoyed seeing explored.
Yeah, and not just with Lysair, but with Sulfin, and you see with you get battles and sieges and other fantasy, and you see them. They're like, oh, it's a big glamorous thing, and this one, excuse me, hammers home that no, it's not. And you even with Sulfin, with the desperation you see, he's constantly got these guys. He's like, no, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this without going crazy, rampaging fanatics. We're gonna starve them out properly. And he's having to make everyone march around and running drills and whatnot just to keep his people in line, because he can't leave them idle while they're sitting there, because they're just basically both sides are sitting there staring at each other over the from different sides of the walls of Alestron. And Yeah, and so he's just like, and they're all like, rah, rah, we must, join Lysair and, burn down the mountain and, all this. And he's like, no, we're going to win this properly. And, that's, well, it's not glamorous or anything. I mean, we had our big moments of, stuff happening, but it's ultimately, I say this, and I don't want to say that the book is boring or anything, but it's like, but a siege in reality is boring. Because you spend a lot of time staring at each other. If once you've got them surrounded and everything, and when you're trying to starve them out and whatnot, and it's not glamorous. It's not, it's just like it's a lot of, sitting there.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Well,
Anything
there
else?
was also Arathon's through line for this. He did not go there to defend the city.
That's correct.
He swore to Branzian he was not going to defend the city. He went there to get Jainsa out.
Yep.
And once he succeeded at that, and he did it in the way that he did it, did you catch the moment where his friends stopped him from ending it the way he wanted to?
That was
After Phelan died.
at the Phelan Day, yeah.
There was a meeting, and he was going to do what he did in Peril's Gate, which was go into the sword. And his friends stopped him because he had used the sword to sing them out, and they were worried he would lose himself
Lose himself in
to the sword. So they actually prevented him from going through with that. He needed their participation. So that's what led to the second choice, which was to go out by way of the Sea Gate. So he was leaving because his objective was finished.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
he didn't actually turn tail and run away. He said from the get-go he was not going to go there to save the city. What he did was save the people who chose not to stay. The ones that weren't so married to their honor or their whatever it was, whatever stake they had, if they could see reason, if they could see that life holds more joy than it does ugliness, they had that free moment to leave. And the ones who took that up were free to leave. And the ones who were determined to stay were determined to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. And I think for me, quickly, that is just an example of Arathon's evolution we see through this arc. He's growing more and more in terms of his majesty, his self-awareness, the responsibility, of his power, and as of course in this arc we see more and more about his connection with the land itself and the Paravians, and he's becoming more attuned. But this is a big struggle for him as Janny get to maintain this new vow of non-violence and avoid bloodshed, and he's tugged and pulled in all these different directions in terms of his loyalties and his allegiances and his morals, and he severed his protection of the Sobridians, but he still feels responsible for them. And of course, Jensa is supposed to be his Cathian, right? So I mean, he offers to heal enemies, like Lorenda. He navigates all these difficult situations with a lot of compassion, a lot of cunning, a lot of skill, and we're beginning to see, if he was worthy to be, a ruler, that this is, I think we see the makings of, like, I think this probably, with the exception of Peril's Gate, I think this is when we've seen him in some ways the most challenged because of the situation that he's in.
Very good.
Yeah.
Chris, were you going to say something else? Or?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say on this topic is that actually Lysair wins in this battle as well. He's able to overcome the curse. Obviously, he wanted to take Ellison as a fortress, but Lysair in calm light of day would not want the slaughter of innocent people either. In the way the curse was affecting him. So his ability to be talked down from it with the original aid of Alethiel is a big moment in the book. It shows that the person, or Varshan PL's favorite character, of them of that he has humanity there, and I think actually the bit before when he is free of the curse and we get reintroduced to Lysair as the person for the first time in books upon books upon books. I think we all, as the readers, kind of see, God, we've forgotten who he is as a person that is not affected by the curse, and I just feel like that whole part of the book is one of my favorite parts of it, because you do lose him for a while, or who the actual person is.
Yeah, your true hero, self in heaven, saved it for you there.
Oh, I didn't know, Varsha, you're on Team Lysair too? I didn't know that. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I have recently signed up.
All right, I got someone. You and I are probably the lone dissenters, and probably the thousands of fans of Janny's work. So that's
my,
awesome.
my turning moment was in Peril's Gate when Arathon figured out that everything he did, all the decisions that he thought were independent, were mired by the Mistrate's manipulation. And Arathon is someone who has had control of the situation. Like, he has far more control of how the Mistrate affects him, or so we've been thinking all this time. With all of his mastery, if Arathon couldn't get a hold on the curse, Lysair, what chance did Lysair have? So, yes, I had a lot more sympathy over Lysair after Peril's Gate.
All right. Well, it must be a Canadian Alliance thing, because But yeah, that's awesome.
I don't live far from Vancouver, so.
Awesome. So another, of course, huge fantasy staple is the magic sword, of course. And in this book, boy, do we ever get to see a magic sword in action with how Arathon used Elithiel. And I just thought it was so unique when we found out, I'm not sure exactly when we found out, but that Elithiel doesn't like being used as a weapon. And I thought that was quite unique when we found that out. And when we see how it is used in this siege, I thought that was fantastic. Janny, how did you come up with that?
Symbolism, the symbolicness of a sword cutting
Mhm.
an ending and a beginning. The symbolism of air. There's layers and layers and layers and layers of symbolism into oldness, old stories, old concepts. I don't want to use the word religion, because that starts to imply dogma. Old belief systems, maybe that's the word that I want. And it crosses cultures, because there's a directionality, the four quarters, and the symbolism of the four quarters and what each quarter stands for. You can see parallels in those symbolisms. I don't care what culture you dig up. It's global. And so I borrowed very heavily off of belief systems that have gone before, but not any one. It's an amalgamation, and the sword and the transcendent change in the East and the air and the new dawn, it's all tied together. And if you dig deeply enough into mythology and old stories and old histories, you will find it. So, and the other thing is that, if you look at certain forms of ritual, often there will be a knife or a sword or something, and it will be symbolic, and it will never be used for killing. Totally not. There are knives that are made that are just to cut herbs, and you only use them at a certain time of the moon. You look across cultures, you look across platforms, you will see the recurring symbolism. So the idea that there would be a weapon that was not a weapon, it's a great deal more than that. It's massively more than that. And most people are going to fall into the same old trap. Oh, a sword is for killing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of ripping that apart and tearing it up into little bitty shreds, and you still haven't seen the half of it. So
yeah. Oh, great.
So I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, sure. And even the characters in here were mistaken in what that sword's use was for.
Look at the numbers too. There were 12 of them. Now look across platforms and look at the number 12 or 24. You'll begin to see cross platforms. I don't want to go into it too deeply because I don't want anyone to stick on this is what I meant, because I was reaching for something more universal. I was reaching for the mathematics underneath of all of these concepts. But if you look in the Tarot, the major arcana, how many are there? There's 24, but they distill to 12. They distill to 4. So you look at the way the energetically everything gets put together. So I was borrowing heavily off of those concepts.
Nice. All right.
And it's cross-platform for archangels. For you can find it wherever you look into a text that's that old. You will find it. If you know what you're looking for, you will find it.
Cool.
So it wasn't anyone. It was the common thread in all of them, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense, yeah. And I was waiting for, as we were going along in the books, I feel like ever since that sword was introduced first in Curse of the Mist Wraith, that we were constantly waiting for when it was going to appear again, when it was going to be used again. And it was we were given a whole bunch of hints along the way, about what this sword means and what's capable of. And now in this book, we've seen such use of power through the sword in such a manner as to really change the course of how the siege was going. And I thought that was just I loved how it was done. I love that brilliant.
And that the bearer is not in charge.
That's right.
She doesn't always wake up for you, sorry, but
yep,
not your choice.
Yeah.
So that should have given you a big hint right there that the bearer was not in charge of what responded there.
Yeah. All right. And what did you rest of you guys think about this these developments with this sword? Anyone?
I like what it did to Lysair, like what Chris, I think it was Chris who already said that. Yeah, that and I guess the fact that the sword was used to make a lot of people realize that they don't want to fight here and bring them out of the fog they were in some cases, or in, I guess, trapped in their own thoughts about whatever glory, I suppose, Branzian thought he was defending by not evacuating the city. So I love that the sword was used for that purpose. And I think I mentioned this in one of our conversations. The sword, as it behaved then, was almost like one of the Adept Grove things, like but like a very miniature form of it. So I love the use of the sword there too. So yeah, I think I'm a fan of Alethea and how she's used. Did you call her she, Janny? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And she actually caused there was actual desertions from Lysae's army there, or the Alliance of Light Army. There was people turning away and going back home and not wanting this warfare that didn't seem to have like their eyes were opened. It didn't seem to have the point that it did before.
Yeah, and I think I think for me, one of the aspects of Janny touched on, there's desertions, there's people, you expect or hope that in the siege, there's going to be a strong sense of alliance and alignment within, certainly the besiegers, but also the people that are being besieged. Now, you see, because in among the Cypridians, they actually, people, I think, tend to forget about the fact that, the Duke, okay, he's the titular head of things, but the Cypridians also have a matriarch, and she is amazing and one of my favorite characters. She actually, I think she had more screen time, a page time period. She would have been one of my top 5 characters overall. And that is the irascible and very wise Dar. And she is like a foil to the unpredictability and the bombastic, nature of her sons, right? And their wives, who are very formidable. And but she had such an amazing part in this book. And I think, you can forget in a book like this is so much about, the people who are actually carrying swords and fighting. And but behind the scenes, there's leaders that are influenced things that may not have the actual title of the ruler, but Dar has a huge influence on how things happen in this book and what happens. And I just think she was just a fabulous character.
Yeah, I agree. We'll get to her in a little bit because I'm gonna ask some questions about characters who are no longer with us. But um, the sorcerers, right off the bat with this series, you establish how powerful they are. These sorcerers, and I know, like Chibi-Po, you were really explaining to us how powerful they are when we started this read along, and but along the way, you systematically, Janny, you've tied them up with being busy correcting this wrong and fixing this Grimward, and they have certain prohibitions that they have. And how did you get around? How did you set out to get around the power creep that these sorcerers could have, and that they don't take over the narrative, basically?
You have to go back to Curse of the Mistwraith, where Arathon's first glimpse of Asandir, his knees buckled. It literally knocked him on his face. And it says right out there he was facing the blinding expanse of the infinite. Right on the page. Square 1, Volume 1, first encounter of a match-trained character meeting this entity face to face. And it literally puts him on the floor. So it's in your face how powerful they are.
Yep.
So about the checks and balances, there's 2 things at play. One is they were part of a massive die-off, a Holocaust. And it wasn't just one little war, it was worlds. They had a part in that. They were not the ones that pushed the nuke, but they were the developmental theory behind it. So they have been the cause of the biggest bloodbath of all time. The dragons chose them because they were the cause of the biggest destruction of all time. That's what made the dragons dream and who they were mesh. When they arrived in Thera, they met the Paravians, and that was their moment of redemption. They were able to say, we have to leave the past behind. Do you think something that powerful? Their power comes direct from the dragons. You've seen the dragons recreate reality like that. Are they going to fall into the same trap? Are they going to make the same mistakes? So there's one check and balance right there. Would you go back and repeat your past? We're told straight out in Grand Conspiracy, where we see Asandir explain what would happen if mankind gets out of control. They would have to exterminate humanity on this planet. That was part of what the dragons bound them to. They don't want to do that at any cost. So they're going to run it right to the edge of the line before they have to repeat their past. So you see that conflict right there. They don't, just like Arathon doesn't want to kill, and he's caught in this siege, the Fellowship of Seven do not want to be responsible for authoring humanity's downfall. So the next step is you have to look at the compact, which was the agreement by which mankind could settle on Athera. Free will cannot be stifled. It's part of humanity's birthright. On the other hand, what is the Fellowship's guide or plan? What's the blueprint that they're striking for humanity to coexist on this planet? And I'm not going to say what that is because it's coming. That's something you're going to need to read and find out. They do have a plan, and they're literally rolling the dice, hoping it will work. And the risk, if it doesn't, is they will have to repeat their past, because they are bound by the dragons that summoned them, and they cannot break that. So keep free will. How do you do that? You give humanity certain boundaries. You give humanity the ability to govern itself. You create a hierarchy and a set of stops, ceilings, after which humanity cannot go further than that. And the High Kings were not ruling the towns. The towns were ruling the towns. The High Kings were in charge of the liaison between the Paravians and mankind. So if mankind wanted to expand from the towns, take their free will out of the towns, they had to deal with the clans and the High Kings, who were stewards of the free wilds, who were stewards of the top layer of the compact, and what lies over that is the seven. So if crown rule fails, the seven have to take charge. So the fail-safes were, we are not going to allow technological development because that's going to lead to mass destruction, just like we're seeing right now. What were they hoping to do? Which way were they hoping to push development in another area? You will have to read and find out, because there is a master plan, there is a blueprint, and it is spoken of, and it will come more and more to the fore, and you will see the finale of it. But I'm not going to give it away here, so I hope I've answered you that. It's choice that holds them in check, nothing else.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a it leads to a lot of tension. These compacts that they have to follow, and and like you said, humanity, you can't stifle free will, and that free will is not always going to want to play by any rules.
No, and the Fellowship said, right, when Davien talked to Dakar, they had a choice when they let in humanity. They had to let it all in. They couldn't say, you come and the rest of you go starve out in space. They had to take the good with the bad.
Right. Yep.
Because if you restrict any one facet, now you've got entropy. Now you've got something that's rigid. It's going to blow up in your face. It's the same principle by which Arathon woke the markers in Atwood and Suckwood.
Yeah.
He sang destruction, knowing that the full circle, the full hoop, was going to come and meet the other half. So he sang destruction to bring up the other half of the circle. Because if you take a piece out of that circle, it no longer rolls. It no longer is infinite. You break pi, you have a real number.
Yeah. Awesome. And who was your favorite sorcerer to write?
Depends on what day. I mean, what are they? I had a good time with all of them, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Pasha, who's your favorite sorcerer?
Setweir, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, Setweir. I like his quiet calmness, but also I love the banter he engages in with. I think because of where he's located, we see him in conversation with all of the other sorcerers more than we see conversations with like any other pair of sorcerers. So yeah, I feel like that brings out his character quite a lot, and maybe that's why I'm fond of him. But yeah, Setweir is my favorite.
Yeah, I find it amazing how distinct you made each sorcerer's personality when you have that many to play with. I think that's quite stunning.
I wanted to ask whether any of them were based on any real life scientists in our world, or
No.
if
No.
you just made them all up.
No. There's a bit of a color wheel going with them, but no. And that digs into some symbolism too. But no, I didn't base them on any one person. they sorted themselves out quite well. And I know that, you know, I had to develop them in different directions or they would have all blurred together.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like Bad Boy Davian myself.
Oh yeah.
It's my fave. That's my fave. That's my fave. Damn, for sure.
Well, he's the one that comes in and spices things up, isn't it? They're like one big happy family, and Davian's on the outside, and then he comes in, and you're not quite sure what he's at, what his end game is, or how he got where he was. And obviously, the flashback in Storm Fortress was like incredible, for giving that a little bit of color to the interrelationships of the Fellowship themselves. It was really illuminating.
Has everybody here read the shorts? The shorts that accompany.
I've read them up until the one you're supposed to read after this.
Black Bargain.
Black Bargain.
Okay.
I read them all except that one. Yeah.
Okay, well,
You'll want that one before Arc 4.
yeah,
Definitely.
Mouth zipped.
Oh,
Yeah,
Well,
I've only
my
read the
mouth's
Gala-
really zipped
Yeah.
because of the novella that I'm working on now. Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
oh,
Oh
geez.
yeah, I sit on those things and I hatch them like eggs until they're cooked, till they're ready. I'm not happy with we start with this premise and we finish with that one.
Yeah.
And
I'm
this
wiping
one
that last-
just did my nice little left turn and I'm going, oh my God. So I can't wait to show that to you guys, but I got a bit to go because I probably got a third of it left to write, but now I have a firm hold that I know the ending is going to blow some tops.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wipe knowledge that there's even another novella coming that sort of drops. I'll be like, not
It'll take me a while to
from the
finish it
blue.
because nothing comes out until I'm satisfied.
Cool.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But Chibi, who's your favorite sorcerer?
That's a tough question. I'd probably, Davian. But I was, hyped for him from the beginning when he's first mentioned. And I'm like, okay, this guy's going to be cool, really, really cool. And, I was not disappointed. Probably Seth Veer after him, though. Kaladas would probably be up there higher, but I just would be up there higher because I just want more of him, and he compared to the others doesn't have a whole lot of appearance across the series. So,
right. Yeah,
but if there were more of him, it would probably be Kaladas.
The coolest mystery, man. Where the hell is like that? That drove me crazy. I kept asking Janny. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That drove me crazy.
Duct tape.
Oh yeah, I agree. I was like from that first little bit where in Curse, and I was just like, okay. I think I emailed Janny once, sometime years ago, with speculation, trying to find out if that's what, if I was right or not. But she was like, nope, can't tell you. Because I was just like, all right, I bet I know where he is.
Excellent. Awesome. And of course the dragon that that shows in this book, what was his name again?
Crustiel.
Crustiel, yes.
Oh, I was going to ask Varsha to do it. Oh, come on.
That we had to look in the glossary how to say it before in a previous live stream, but the dragons being so powerful, and is that that is I think these dragons that you have given to us here are kind of overtake any other dragons in previous fantasy there as far as their power and their influence on what's going on in this world. Was that your goal, was to have the ultimate dragon be even above these sorcerers who are
Jared, I get bored really easily. Really, really easily. So if these dragons had been like every other dragon you ever read in fantasy, I would be freaking bored. But there's more than that. It also goes back into the earlier history because you were talking Third Age. And the Third Age. And then we have the Second Age and the First Age. The First Age was Praevian. Second Age was the arrival of Fellowship. Third Age is mankind. Before that, there were eras and there were dragons.
There were dragons, yes.
And there was the era of destruction. There was the era of creation. There was the era, all dragons. Because Ath's gift to the world to heal what the dragons had done and to awaken the dragons was the Praevians. First stage, arrival of the Praevians, and it didn't work. They were getting slaughtered. So some dragons sort of got it, and they formed the Protectorate, and they combined to dream the solution, and they got the Praevians, and then they were losing the battle. That's why they called the Seven. So in order to understand the dragons and the full picture of the dragons, you need to go back to the 3 eras before the one we're in now.
Nice.
And it's massive. It is massive. And there was much more going on with the dragons in the First Stage than you would see in the Third Age. And I can't say why, because there's going to be more reveals coming.
Awesome. I can't wait to get there.
So yes and no, I guess, is my answer.
Yeah. And of course there was the scene. Davian was doing things, and then he had some sort of a deal with this dragon to appear corporeal at points and I'm not sure the full details of this deal, because then he kind of fell into the dragon's eye or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. And the dragon was, they were talking to each other. That whole thing was wild. I I don't know what you guys thought, but I was just like, what did this sorcerer do to get in this situation with this dragon? And I'm not sure. Don't tell me if the answer's coming up, but I am fascinated with that aspect of it all.
You need to read the short.
Very good.
Which short?
Black Bargain.
Black Bargain. That name makes total sense now, I think. So
and you need to realize that whatever was going on, Davian was sharing some of that dragon's abilities.
Yes.
And you need to understand that if you go back to earlier history, the dragons encased themselves in stone to hibernate because there were wars among the dragons and they were attacking each other during hibernation. So originally, the dragons did not encase in stone to hibernate. That's a new thing, relatively speaking, in the grand span of history. So that stone chamber, beneath that's where your dragon was hibernating. And that, I'm not spoiling anything because that really doesn't come out in the books. That's all back history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole long history of the dragons and what they created and how they attacked each other and what they dreamed into being to attack each other and what those things became and how they escaped control and evolved on their own accord. And so now we're into Second Age and First Age history. And yeah, there were massive, massive conflicts. Totally no people involved.
Awesome. And we're getting, with this book, Storm Fortress, we've definitely gotten a greater view of the world, of characters. And one thing I noticed that I felt when reading this book, when I finished this book, is I got a greater sense of hope for the future. The last few books from Fugitive Prince on have been quite a bit darker than the endings in this one. They had a darker tone. There wasn't as much hope that that came out of them. This one gave me a little more hope for the future, with basically Lysair being getting a glimpse of what it's like not to be under the curse, and of course Arathon is free of the curse now. But
Yeah, you didn't see chapter 5 coming.
yeah, that was awesome. That was completely awesome. Another use of the sword too. But you maintained like quite a lengthy, subtle shift of manipulation of the characters and us, the reader's perspective, throughout this whole is it 4-book arc? And 4-book arc, yeah. And that was that is just quite the feat in and of itself. And
I'm not finished.
right. But
Right,
and
Paul? I'm not finished.
I know and we got 2 more arcs left, because the final book is its own arc, and like the next 2 books are an arc as well. But this was the longest one in the series, and so I just got like, as writing these things, how did you maintain that because it's a long time, it's a long how did you maintain that subtle shift in reader perspective and just expectations?
I didn't. I put it all on the page. I let you fall into your own traps. And then gradually lifted the perspective of what you were seeing so that you could see what I saw. And you do it as the character journey, because when Lysair and Arathon come through that gate, they know nothing.
That's right.
So that was how it was done, by creating this whole massive world and this whole massive story, and then giving you a viewpoint that had to evolve to match up to it. So as long as I stayed strictly in viewpoint and let the characters' assumptions play, and then knowing what the assumptions I see play every day when people watch the news and jump to conclusions. And I'm going, you don't have the answer. This is not one side and the other side. This is not either or. This is every person involved's point of view in concert, and none of us can encompass that. So I just let your prejudices speak to you and lead you astray. I didn't do a thing.
I didn't do a thing. I didn't do a thing.
I love it. I love it.
And how do we navigate the world that we live in, where the information flows so fast and most of it isn't true?
Yeah,
you have to make a decision based on what you think is true. Otherwise, you're paralyzed. And then you have to deal with the consequences. So the characters do the same thing. They react, they do what they think is right, and then they have to live with what was right or wrong, and how do they reconcile that? And then you blow the perspective again and again and again. That's just how we live our lives, unless we switch off and stop evolving.
Yeah. And those consequences are and the characters dealing with those consequences are very front and center in the narrative.
It's really easy to have an opinion on what's going on in the news and say these people are wrong, but what if you're the guy making that decision?
Yeah.
It's real easy to spout off and think you know it all and let your ego say, I understand this perfectly, and why are these idiots doing what they're doing? We're not the ones in the driver's seat making those choices, and sometimes they may have more information than we have, or sometimes they may be manipulating us. How do we sort this?
Yeah, I think, and I love that, Janny, about your work, and that is why I absolutely love, and of course I mentioned Lysair's my fave, but why I love Lysair's chapters as much I love Arathon's, because you see the other side. Like right now, we talk about these controversies. I won't get into it. It's another controversy going on in book 2, that there's 2 sides, and but the point is, what you present to us is two characters who both innately have these embedded codes of ethics based on their heritage into them. And it's like most of our human traits, they're often both a blessing and a curse. They're our strength and our weakness. If you're married, to justice, then there are restrictions and flaws that it will naturally come of that, right? So, yeah, it's. I just think it's masterful the way you've done that and showing all sides and why a certain character makes the decisions they do. And I think the reader asked themselves, what would you do in that situation? If you think you're so perfect, right? And you make the right decision all the time. What would you do in that situation? Based on all the things that this character is confronting. And I love that about your work.
Yeah. And I think it's great because it's set up so that you don't know if the characters are making the right decisions. Even if you were in that situation and you made a different decision, you don't know if that's right either. And you get to see the consequences of some of those decisions later on down the line. And it's just and that's just excellent characterization to that we're seeing here, and I like how that's done.
You have to make a decision at a pinpoint at a moment in time, but what perspective are you making that decision, and how far does your knowledge run? And boy, are you going to see things wide open in Arc 4. You got more perspectives coming, but it's very hard because how do you choose? If you always choose love always says yes, and that is equally flawed as when you have too much will and you start a war. Too much right hand, too much left hand is an imbalance. And so somehow you got to fall in between that. And how do you hear exactly what is the right choice? And it's all tied to perspective. As we evolve, our perspective grows, and choices get harder, not easier. When you were 15, it was easy. Your parents were dummies and you knew it all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll Chris, you back with us?
Yeah. I've been sitting
Okay.
listening away, having to keep my camera off because it's been unstable. What I was just going to say, I just tell my kids, remember I'm an idiot. Sometimes you have to obey me, but most of the times, we're not perfect human beings. It's a good lesson to live by.
Yeah. So we lost some characters I liked in this book here. There are quite a few deaths that occurred. I think the one that probably scarred me the most was the death of Phelan. That was we've pretty much grown up with her throughout this series, and now she's gone. How could you do that to us, Janny? That's my question.
I was crying so hard writing that scene. I was crying so hard when I proofed those scenes. I can't get through it without tearing up.
Yeah, that was a rough
so
one.
that one was rough. Kiriel, we kind of knew because Arathon saw it. That's why he did what he did with Glendian back in Trader's Knot. He didn't see how it would happen or when, but he knew it was coming. And the father knew it too. They all knew it. So that one I was a little prepared for, but not. I always knew. I knew that scene was happening with Phelan. I knew it. Since she was a little kid, pounding on Arathon to get her way. I knew it. There would come a time when she would put it all on the table, but it was still very, very hard to write. It's always hard to lose a character.
Yeah, but I mean, in contrast to that, I thought Dame Dawes' ending was very fitting and beautiful.
Yeah,
and
she couldn't live forever, so something
exactly.
had
to. She was very, very ancient, and
the one that had my heart in my throat was writing Sidyr's line there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because writing those scenes, that was just a white hot. I didn't know if he was going to make it, honestly, going into that sequence. I knew he was going to stand in front of James and try to prevent what was happening. That was his character straight through. That was him. But, when I planned the entire series out, I didn't know every little detail. That was one. It could have gone either way. And those characters in that scene, they chose their fate right there. It came out the way it came out. But going in there, I did not know which way it was going to go. And that's part of the reason why it's so intense, is because the characters didn't know either.
Yeah. I want to give some love, though, for Fionn, because, he
was next. Yeah.
He's seen as this frustrating, irritating character for so much. Well, basically from the time he's old enough to, understand.
He thought he was special.
Yeah, but you gave him a glorious, meaningful death, and a brave death, and that's one thing that consistently he was, of all of his characteristics. I think bravery, whether it was foolish bravery, but bravery, I think, was always a part of his makeup. And he went out. You gave him a good death, Janny, and I really enjoyed that aspect. That it was tragic, and you always wonder, what he could have been.
He got what he wanted. I think it goes with a certain philosophical bent that says, when you strip everything down to brass tacks, we always get what we want. The problem is when we think we don't get what we want, we actually are, but we're not conscious of the choices we're making. We're not conscious of what we're putting out. It always comes back. And if you look at Fionn's life, he studied for the sword. He wanted to be the hero. He wanted to impress the men at arms. He wanted to fight at their side. He wanted to be accepted as one of them. And so you don't cry for his death, because he got what he wanted. So it's only tragic from the perspective of, well, he died young, but he got exactly what he wanted, which was to stand at Vanden's shoulder and earn the respect of the people he was working with, and earning the respect of the shipwrights on his own merits, not as Arathon's double, not as something the Coriathane made, not as anything to do with anyone else. He claimed his fate right there and then. So I see it that he came into himself in that moment, and he achieved what he wanted to achieve.
Yep, and I really enjoyed that, and thank you for giving us that, a kind of almost like, I won't say a redemption arc for him, but again, yes, a fitting end.
He finally broke away from being the pawn of other people.
Yes.
He made his choice, and he made the choice he wanted to make. So I think that's why I didn't cry writing his scene, where I did for Phelan.
Yeah. I'm sort of fascinated by Fionn's arc, because obviously he plays a big part in Grand Conspiracy, etc. Within that, and obviously there's a prophecy that we're waiting on. But for many books, he was the subject of ire of the readers. I think very clearly. I would imagine most readers will be incredibly frustrated by him. I even love the nod at the start of this book when James is on his side, and within about a chapter or so, she's like, "Oh my god, this fella's doing my head in." He kind of had that effect on everybody. Was he a contrasting character through those bits? Because obviously you obviously resolved some stuff with them with Grand Conspiracy, but kept him alive quite crucially, through that, obviously, to give him this end. So I'm sort of fascinated, as from a writer's perspective, what you wanted from Fionn for that part. Was it a contrasting?
No, I saw him as having no agency, and his desperate striving to get agency. And he's angry at everybody because pretty much he was told he was special. He discovered he wasn't. He was just a tool. He was made to look like somebody else as a game piece. And so I see him rebelling against everybody because he didn't know who he was. He never had a chance to find out who he was. And everything that he dreamed that he was crumbled and fell apart. You know, he wasn't the great swordsman. He got himself captured. He had to be rescued by this guy that he thought was the evil guy. He thought he was going to be the great hero and go sign up with the light and fight this guy. And he got rescued by this guy. I mean, so at every turn when he goes to grab for agency, it crumbles out from under him. And so that's why I see him as so brittle, and nobody knows which way he's going to snap either, because he doesn't know himself. Sidir said it. He doesn't know himself. And so there was no predicting which way he was going to jump. So if that makes sense, yeah, it was infuriating. But if you had to walk in that character's shoes, how infuriating would that be?
Absolutely.
You're brought up to believe you're special. You get this special sword training. You run away from home to go be the great hero in this huge war. And it's all a farce. You're actually nothing. You were being used every step of the way. So wouldn't you distrust every single person that came along and said, no, you mean something? It's like, come on. And he could never run away from his face. He could never be someone else. He could never cut his own track, because wherever he went, he was seized by the fact that he was made into a tool. So that's why I see him as an infuriating character, is because he's lashing out at every constraint that's placed on him.
Yeah.
So it just made sense. That's the way he wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you almost can't blame him for a lot of it, because it's just there's this thing about, you know, free will contrasted with consent. There's a theme of that kind of going through the book. And he, you know, technically gave his consent for this procedure when he was just a boy, but obviously didn't know what he was agreeing to. And so, you know, that kind of manipulation on the part of the Koreani, you know, makes me hate them even more. Not that I've had any problem hating their organization in any other point in the book. And it's just, we get that they almost trying to tramp down on free will a lot, the Koreani. And of course the Compact is emphasizing free will in some points, up to a certain point. And so when you were playing with all that kind of you know, those kind of themes, it seems like you were really using that a lot in this book in particular, but all the way up to this book too,
because it's going to be an important point going forward. But if you think about it too, this guy had his face changed and his life shaped because he was a tool to bring down Arathon.
Yeah.
And Arathon keeps offering the best life he can give him. Are you going to take that from somebody that you were created? So you were the insignificant cipher. Do you see why he's so not going to take anything from Arathon, not 1 inch? And he might almost start to think about it. And then the minute he does, he's going to whiplash, because Arathon was the significant figure and he was just a tool. And he's what, 18 years old, 17, 18? He was 16 when he left home. So a little time has passed. What 16-year-old is going to sit still for that? Not happening.
Nope. and who died along with him on the docks? I remind me that it
was Vanden.
Vanden, that's right. Yeah, okay, Vanden. Let's try to remember his name. Yeah. So we lost those guys. We lost Vanden. We knew we were going to lose Kiriel. That was going to happen eventually. Phelan, Dame Daw. Was there somebody else who did Carrick make it?
No, Catrick died.
No, Catrick died.
Yeah, he died as well.
And you also lost Keldmar.
Keldmar, right. Okay. Yeah, it should be just reminded us. Yeah, so lots of big climatic deaths in this volume, which really, I think, made this particular, like PL said earlier, this one's in my top 2 I would say for me.
You haven't read the last book yet. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm waiting. But so this yeah, and that it and I in the other my other top two is War Host of Vastmark. So it says something about your endings, Janny.
Arc
that
finish.
arc
You're hitting the
finish
arc
endings.
finishes.
Yeah,
The arc
that
finishes.
really make these books. Those are my favorites, and you
So going
really
into Initiate's trial,
the Lancet.
realize your arc finishes Destiny's conflict.
yes, yep.
So it's got to lift to another level. So be ready.
Oh,
You'll get
we're
the arc
ready.
finish. You'll get it.
But I think for me, and I think I've talked to a lot of people that have become recent fans of your work. I know this is an arc beginning, but Janny, I'm telling you, Peril's Gate, like I said, it's
Tipping point.
this the ending of this and what Arathon undergoes in this is just this lives rent free in my head. That last
It's the tipping point. It had to be a peak because that is the tipping point.
Yeah.
This is the point where it really departs from traditional fantasy completely. Where all the ground you were standing on before this, you could almost reconcile that with other fantasies that are out there. After this one, you can't. This one is the one that blows it all to bits.
Yeah, I think Peril's Gate is where I knew this was going to be in my top 3 fantasy series of all time, but Peril's Gate was like, this is it. This is as good as it's going to get for me for my conceivable future.
Historically, it made me crazy because that is the point where the U.S. dropped out, and I said, we've just hit stride. We have just reached the point where this series is going to open up and begin to be what it's going to be. And you haven't seen it yet. You won't until the finish. That final volume, you won't see it. And that just was so infuriating because I said, if this gets cut off here, it's like a child learning to walk and they lose their legs. I mean, this is the moment where it, and here's the other discussion group just barely crawling out of Trader's Knot. And I'm like,
Well, I think once they get here, I think, like I said, all the people I talked to, this is when
this is when you can see what I was actually doing, and it's only the pinhole in the aperture.
Yeah, and
it's going to get wider.
And I know it's not about pantheons and gatekeeping, but all my Malazan friends and my Wheel of Time friends, like those people who haven't read, when they get into this and when they get this jerk, that's when they all go, oh, okay, I see what you're talking about, PL. It's up there. It's up there.
But how do you pack that in? Because that book wouldn't have worked without everything done before as carefully as it was done. There was no way to build to that peak without everything that came before. Yeah. And so it does. It frustrates me because I've got the duct tape over my mouth and I see people say, oh, yeah, it's just this. Until you get to that tipping point, and then you have to travel past that because it's not going to go where you think.
Oh,
that perspective is going to shift again and shift again and shift again. And so, but that's where I was always going. It's just I had to do it in stages.
I know for Chimapo and I, we're just like, for Jared, Chris, and Varsha, you read this and you go, oh, wow. But then you just the next book.
But you're right in a lot of ways about Peril's Gate, because as soon as that Theon, Ramon, and Kiwar, etc. happen, like we talked about this last discussion in terms of how you've got into the habit of reading Janny's prose really carefully because there's always so much in it, right? You always have to get something out of it. So you're sort of like, I like our pace for it because it sort of forces you to go slowly and not kind of rattle through to get to the end of the book or something. But once you hit Kiwar, I think in that point, my gaps between reading became really short. Because like we did everything in 4. It absolutely does.
I slowed the language way down for Peril's Gate. That's the thickest one as far as descriptive, because there was like too many levels that I was introducing, and then I pared it back. It gets denser, so you got to be careful you don't speed too fast.
Yes.
From here forward, because there's just as much information, and it's just it's leaner because I didn't have to explain so much. And I think one of the most misunderstood moments in this series, and I don't know how I'd go back and fix it because I honestly don't know any other way to say it. But the people that read that sequence through QR and they get tired of the line "Cry mercy," and they say, "Why did she repeat herself so many times?" And the point to that was that at any moment during that traverse, Arathon could have accepted himself and realized he was no more than he could have been in the moment. He could have accepted that redemption and that forgiveness at any moment. That's what the cry mercy was. He could have stopped it all.
Yeah.
All of that suffering and that reliving was unnecessary if he had understood that moment. And if you read the paragraph where he accepts who he is and why he did what he did, and that there's no fixing what came before. If you read that redemption sequence at the finish, then you understand at any moment he could have gone through the same process. So that's what the whatever number of times, whatever they say when they review it, they say, "Oh, she repeated this." That was the point of that phrase, was that the suffering that we put ourselves through is unnecessary. What we need to do is accept where we are, that particular moment in time of understanding our self-worth.
All right. Just want to take a moment and say thank you, Ida, for joining us today in crying havoc in the chat.
I think one of the things that the whole sequence does is remind you that Arathon is fallible and is just a man, and that actually it is strength of endeavor and strength of character that he keeps on persevering through it, because it is difficult. You know, that is reinforced, I think, the way through it, and that we sort of have that thing that you do when you don't want your characters to suffer, but also you see as a period of growth for him, personal growth, not just personal growth, but also within the eyes of Davian, actually, as it turns out within the story of like Davian's respect and his kind of admiration of Arathon for coming through that whole period is just like, right, okay, this is he's a very impressive young man, and well, not young anymore because he's obviously been alive through this sort of thing. But in terms of what his lifespan's going to be, in terms of that, he's still a young man in terms of his life cycle. So, like that whole period from there on, just these books just became the gaps between my reading cycles were closed up, and it meant that we did like 4 chapters at a time last book, no break coming after the next book. We just have to keep going.
No, that you'll be surprised how fast they move.
Yeah.
I made that decision, I think it was here. I'd have to go back and check, to just go straight through. I've done that with Malazan. I made that call to just, I'm just going to finish this off.
Yeah.
I'm that close. And I think after the next book, it's going to be hard for you to not just.
Oh yeah,
I'm all for it. Do it.
We're
I'll
in.
let you on.
We're in. Next Sunday, we're meeting again already.
Watch what happens when Arathon passes the midpoint in Kiwar. Because there's a very, very clear statement in the middle of Peril's Gate where he completes the self-redemption. And Davian says it straight out. Now you've handled your past, how will you handle your future?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a second phase to that. And that's going to sort of, I'm not spoiling anything because you've read that, it's behind you. But a lot of people skate right over that and miss it. But there's there's a reason for that second phase.
Yeah, totally immersive. Like I said, the best decisions I ever made as a reader of any series was just going straight through with The Wars of Light and Shadow when I got to this point. And just, I didn't read anything else. I was totally immersed. And I found I picked up so much more. And I was just so much more in tune. So I welcome anyone, and not necessarily people here. Of course, I recommend it to all of you here. But I think for people reading this series, you will get to the point where you just can't put it down. And reading other things, there's so many great books out there. There's so many amazing series. But you get to the point with this series where you just want to read this and you want to finish it, and you need to compulsively know what happens, right? So yeah, I just think that this lends itself to that completely immersive.
Wait till you go back and look at
reading.
book one again. It'll be a whole different book. Whole
Yeah,
series will look different from the perspective that you have. It'll be
Yeah.
completely different.
Yep, I started my soft reread of I'm up to I'm still on Warhost, but I already started that in between reading because I was actually trying to contrast and compare, and I know it's not fair. There are very different books and series. I was actually trying to while I was reading Malazan, because again, these incredible series, these long series by these iconic authors, as a writer especially, I'm trying to learn, right? I'm trying to learn at the feet of the greats like the Janny Wurts and the Stephen Ericksons. You're trying to get better, and you pick up all these things. Like I said, when you go back, it's like, oh my gosh, the depth of that, how poignant that was. I totally missed this aspect. Now I get it, and those are all things that are just, especially as a reader, but as a writer as well. It's part of my. I feel like I'm doing I'm doing a thesis or something, right? I'm doing an undergrad. I'm doing a graduate
Luckily, it's
degree.
not such a chore.
No, it's not. It's a labor of love, and that's this could only be a labor of love, Janny.
I know,
this
I know, and it was designed to be reread not once but many, many times because you'll continue to see things, and as you get older, you'll continue to see more things. It was supposed to be timeless. That's partly why the language is set up to be a little bit archaic. Because I didn't want to tie it to modern slang. I didn't want to tie it to modern language. I wanted it to have that alternate mythic feel.
Yeah.
Oh, you accomplished that. You accomplished that.
That's one of the things I appreciate actually a lot about your series here is it is so consistent in its language, and there's no hint of any kind of modern slang or any kind of other slang really. It's contained within itself with its language, and I appreciate that a lot.
And I think to your point, PL, about these very long series, we'll probably never see series like this ever again in mainstream publishing because of the way publishing works now. Like these very long series are just what we have up to this point, and done it. And so it's something that we've got to treasure and really get the most out of, because people will probably not have the chance to do this again.
Yeah, and I think that's a shame, right? Because look at how illustrious this series is, and all the other big series, the Wheels of Times and the Realms of the Elderlings and the Malazans, and I think unfortunately it's indie where you're going to see now these big long series.
If they can get the time, that's the hard part, is because publishing changed so drastically from when I conceived of this idea to even when I sold book one. It was already moving, and now it's moving at light speed. How do you get an indie writer that's going to be able to devote a lifetime to just constructing the language? Because I did this series full time, and so
I'm trying, Janny.
It'll never happen again. But I also know it would not have happened if I hadn't wanted it so badly.
Janny,
it would not have happened. And the Empire series, honestly, and a lot of the translations helped to pay for it.
But Janny, you're my example. You're one of the biggest reasons why I feel encouraged to write. You are probably the biggest reason why I feel encouraged to write a long series that someone may actually read it one day.
They will, and there will be other series like this, but it's gonna take such a burning amount of will to do it. You're gonna have to cut through every naysayer and every constriction of society and I literally came out with a college degree and said I can't go get a job. I'm going to have to muck stalls. I'm going to have to do little things on the side. I'm going to have to do graphic design. I'm going to have to do little freelance things to keep the large portion of my time open to do this work. And I lived on a shoestring. I was eating graham crackers, cucumbers, and pulling hen's eggs out of the barn. That's what I was eating. So, and I was living on a farm where I could do that. The landlord grew stuff. He'd leave me a bucket of vegetables on the back step every day when he'd pick the garden. So, what I didn't do was what all my peers were doing, because I realized the minute I took that full-time job, I would be hooked on the income I would get sucked into, your health insurance paid for. You can't break away again. You can never get out of it. Once you step into that pit, it swallows you. You live your life for somebody else, and it's hard to do that.
But Janny, you're not even peaked yet. Like you haven't even reached your peak. And the people that are now jumping onto the series, decades after you started writing it, I mean, you haven't even peaked yet. And that's why I know that talk to us in 10, 15, 20 years, this is going to just continue to ascend and ascend and ascend and ascend in popularity. And, because again, it's just iconic. And the more people realize that, yep, it's going to have the same fan base as those other series that I mentioned. And even now, your fans are loyal. Like the people like the Chibapos who've been there from the get, they are incredibly loyal and immensely loyal, deservingly so, of course, for you, to your work because it's spectacular, right? Like,
it's true. My readers that get it are extremely loyal. And back when publishing went through a major shift, I was working, I guess it was just about when Fugitive Prince came out. Paper went up. You can see in the hardback, the paper was cheaper on that. Everything went crazy right about that time. And that was pre all the big mergers. And my editor at the time told me, she said, all of our other authors are losing ground. They're losing readership. Your books are staying the same. And the mistake the publisher made was right then and there. They should have put money into advertising it immediately, because the fact I wasn't losing readership, it could have done this, but they would not put anything. That was the moment where they stopped putting any effort behind the books at all. It was Fugitive Prince. So it was a missed moment, and maybe the cream will rise, but in order for the cream to rise, people have to see it. And in order to see it, it's got to be visible. And we're a very small sliver of that visibility. But
well,
it's coming. I feel really, really grateful because I didn't think I'd have this moment at all.
All right. And Ida agrees with you. Yeah.
It is spectacular.
Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Ida. This is what's making it worth it, is seeing, even if it's just a few people that appreciate it. Because when I set out to do it, I knew at Curse of the Mistwraith what I was doing, but it was impossible to describe it.
The hardest thing, I think, for readers, and perhaps I don't want to stereotype or put any readers in a box or a bucket. I just think in general, I think it's just human nature. The hardest thing to do is to trust the process, to trust an author, that author 99% of the time has a plan, a really detailed, highly organized plan for especially a long series, right? And they mapped everything out to the T. And there's a reason why they write things a certain way. There's a reason why the characters make certain choices. There's a reason why not everything. I mean, so much of what the writers do in these series, readers may perceive it as a plot contrivance, and it's not, right?
It requires that you read every word on the page. Surprise. It requires that you don't jump to conclusions what you think the writer is doing, that whatever other fantasy you just came off of, that this is the same thing. No, you have to read every word on the page and give it its proper weight. And then you'll see whole worlds open up because, again, assumptions cloud everything.
Yeah. I've been just as guilty, Janny, like starting your series and not understanding, hopefully giving you the benefit of the doubt. Definitely, I was doing that, but not quite understanding where certain things are going. But then within a few books, wow, right? And then, of course, like I said, you get to Peril's Gate and that's it. So.
Well, it's really a pleasure to see you guys getting it. Like I said, your discussion last week was just electric. It was fantastic to see you so engaged with what was happening. So I said, yeah, I did my job.
Well, you've got to remember, I finished that book literally the week beforehand and still had that amount of energy to that point, and then now to this week, it stays with you. And I think that's one of those things. It's not like, other books that you read that kind of give that instant gratification. You go, "God, that was on a ride there," but there's like a nourishment, I think, that comes from the type of storytelling that you've done here.
Remember back to the discussion we had at Curse of the Mysteries, where I said I'm going to give you an experience.
Yeah,
yeah,
very much that.
I think you're
very
getting
much
it.
That.
I think you're getting it now.
No, it is absolutely an experience to read these, and we are all very thankful for what the work you've done and the work you put into this. And it's an experience, like you said, and those are the things that stick with you and make being a reader an enjoyable thing, is when you have an experience like this. And so I think we all thank you for doing all the work you've done and writing such a great thing.
Well, thank you for giving it your time. That's the biggest gift you could give to the words on that page.
All right. So any last questions before we wrap up this live stream?
I don't think I have any questions. I just have my general things I'm excited for, and this is where I can see whether PL is worth playing poker against or not. Going forward, like we like, I don't know this. Varsha will probably know. We're almost certainly going to a time jump. I talked about this last week. About being the end of our arc, probably going to a time jump, and then seeing whether some of our favorite characters are going to survive. We talked about Sulfan last week. I suspect probably not, but it'll be nice if he does. I'll just have to get the t-shirt made. But the character to watch for me, as I've said before, is Lorenda. I just feel like Lorenda has a story arc to fulfill there as well, in terms of that. And then obviously we talked about Prince Kevor, whether we'll ever see him or Elaine again. That'll be interesting. There's like a lot of loose ends or loose threads still hanging out there that we've been so concentrated on a certain, siege and the fellowship and how that's working, and then obviously there's lots of threads still hanging out there in the world which are just keeping teased. And as we often say, in each chapter you get the 3 sections, you get the 3 news points at the end. There's 6 things minimum, massive things are going to happen every chapter in this series. Like, if I was going to sell this to anybody as a story, like, it's like stuff happens here continually. It is just it is so much fun.
Yeah, and as we all know, Chris loves his predictions.
Yeah, I never remember making them, but it's fine.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah, we're all sitting here with the duct tape over our
I know.
Yeah, that's good.
I was watching PL and his face just went.
yeah, poker face.
So that's great.
All I have to say, final comment is, thank you so much, Jared. I'm so honored that you invited me here to be with these wonderful people. Thank you, Janny, for writing this miraculous series that's become my favorite fantasy series of all time. I will read every single thing that you write. And, again, for everyone out there who's looking for the next great fantasy series, if you haven't invested yet, what are you waiting for? It's a long series, and the payoffs, it's worth every penny.
Of course, they're not listening because we send them off with spoilers.
All right, and
but, yeah, it's cool.
Ida thanks us as well.
Cool.
So, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in, Ida. That's great. And
is she on the page doing discussion?
I'm not sure.
Not as far as I know, but you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, she could sign up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This is not a closed group here, people.
It's definitely is not. Anybody is more than welcome to join.
Absolutely. And with that, Chris, where can we find you?
Well, you can probably find me on patreon.com, as Johnny quite rightly said there, on the Speculative Speculations podcast, where we talk about sci-fi books mostly, and on my channel, which is Chronicler Chris.
Excellent. And Basha?
All the places Chris just said, and the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, where I only post discussions. So.
Great discussions, Varsha. Great discussions.
Yes.
And Bass.
Mm-hmm. All right. And PL?
Page 2 in both the flagship, Steve's flagship, and also the interview series with Taylor and I. My channel, The Drunk King Saga 7847. Before I go blog is just an editor for reviews. Have tons of reviews of Janny's books on Before I Go blog and on Goodreads. My website, www.peelstart.com for the books. And I think that's it. At Peelstart Writes for all the socials.
Yeah, PL does great reviews if you guys get a chance to check them out. And Chibipo, where can find you?
Like everybody else, I can be found on Page Chewing and also on Blue Sky. And I just sort of lurk in all kinds of other places. So you never know where I'll turn up.
All right. And of course, Janny.
My website is the only Janny Wurts in the world. You should be able to find the official website. I have accounts at Goodreads. I have an account at Twitter because still there's a lot of book community and some people still use direct message. So I got to kind of stay in touch there. I got an account at Blue Sky. You can find me there. And I'm also on Goodreads. You can find me there. I don't post a lot of these. And there is a fan page on Facebook. I don't drop in very often, but it's managed by my web guy. So if the messages are turned off, but if you drop a question there and it's one that's unusual enough, he will forward it on to me. And I'm available. My email is very public. It's on the website. So
Yeah.
I don't hide. I'm pretty easy to find.
That is true. And thank you for that too. Thank you for being so available and being so willing to do all these things that you're on a lot of other streams as well. And everybody appreciates that, having access to the author like we do. And that's always great. And anybody who's watching, you can also find me on the podcast on Page Chewing and at my channel, The Fantasy Thinker. And so, with all that said, read Janny's books, catch up to us if you can, and join us for future discussions if you can. And also check out PL's series, The Drowned Kingdom Saga. Currently delving into book 5 right now.
Yeah, it just gets better and better and better.
And having a great time with that. And you can tell that PL has put the effort in for this one.
He has. It's a unique series, and it's wonderful because Paul is not afraid to grab the bull by the horns and twist. He also writes some of the finest battle scenes in fantasy anywhere. So, talk about a conflicted, likable, unlikable hero that you want to punch him one minute and hug him the next. There's a masterful play of character in the Drowned Kingdom Saga. You definitely want to pick that one up.
Absolutely.
Praise from my favorite author is high praise indeed. Thank you, Janny. And thank you all. Jared, thank you as well. Jared.
Yep. And thanks, Mike, for watching, my friend Mike. And we're going to sign off here. So thanks, everybody. Double.